Matthew chapter 7 is the last chapter of Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount. So it started in chapter 5, continued in chapter 6, and it's going to end here in chapter 7. He says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged." And this is a pretty popular statement that Jesus made, because a lot of people today say, see, we're not supposed to judge others. But notice what he says here as you read this on your own. He's actually not really saying we shouldn't ever judge others. What he's saying is, you should deal with your sin before you help someone else deal with their sin. So he's not saying don't help someone else to honor God in their life, especially if they're a Christian. You should help them, but you should make sure that you deal with your sin before you deal with someone else's sin, because otherwise you're just being a hypocrite. And then he talks about in the next section, effective prayer. He says, keep on asking and you'll receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open to you. And then the famous golden rule, verse 12, do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. And so again, this kind of goes back to, we've mentioned Matthew 22, and that's where Jesus gives the answer to the greatest commandment. When the Pharisees asked him, what's the greatest commandment? He says, you should love the Lord your God with everything, and then you should love your neighbor as yourself. And so what he's referring to in verse 12 is the golden rule. He's referring to loving your neighbor as yourself. Do to others what you would like them to do to you. The way you want to be treated, you should treat others that way. And that's the golden rule. And Jesus was genius to say that this is really what all the rules are about. It's not just about religious rules and values that relate to our relationship with God, but it also relates to our relationship with other human beings around us. And so then he talks about the narrow gate. He talks about trees and their fruit and true disciples. I'll let you read all that. But I want to scroll down here to verse 24. He says, anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise. This is like the close of his sermon. Remember this, chapters 5, 6, and 7, that was all his Sermon on the Mount. He says, if you listen to my teaching and you follow it, you're wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock instead of on sand, right? So this is a good foundation for your whole life, is what Jesus is saying. And then after that sermon was over, it says the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because remember, he was just a carpenter, but he taught with real authority, quite unlike their teachers of religious law. So the religious teachers didn't teach with authority or conviction because they were hypocrites. But Jesus knew what he was talking about because Jesus is God. And so that's where all of this wisdom was coming from. So go ahead and read Matthew chapter 7 now on your own, and we'll see you tomorrow for chapter 8.